Well, I don't think that the BBC should immediately give him any more than they've already indicated, which is an apology. And Samir Shah, the chair, has already said he apologises for the error, the joining together of two separate parts in the interview to make them look at one, and that was a mistake. If he wants that apology repeated in spades, I expect it can be said a number of times. But Donald Trump's got. It's always interesting to me that Donald Trump, whose proximity to the truth is, to put it mildly, often challenged, should regard the BBC, and I think he used the word corrupt and dishonest. That's what he said, I think, and that is really, it seems to me, to be outrageous.
And I suppose the other issue is, do you think Donald Trump actually has a strong case?
I don't think he has a strong case. I think he has a weak case. I think that that it was an error, an editorial error. In written journalism, you take a bit of a quote and you put ... and then you put the rest of the quote. They should have put in a visual equivalent of that, whether that is fading to black, going to white, or making a link. I think it was done to stimulate interest in the programme, which a lot of people watched, and there were virtually, as far as I know at the time, no complaints at all about the balance of the programme. So I think it was a serious error. It should have been picked up, and it should have been, once it was identified, corrected and apologised earlier than it was. But the BBC in these matters, because they want to be so thorough, tends to go more slowly than would be desirable in terms of relations with the public.
Do you think then these two high-profile resignations are bowing to pressure put on them by the American administration?
No, I don't actually think that. I think that, I should say that I know Tim Davie pretty well, and I have a very high regard for him. And when I heard the news, I was shocked and dismayed, because I think he's by far the best person in a very difficult position to guide and take the BBC through to the very rough waters of what is going to be the charter renewal process. It is exceptionally important for public broadcasting. I think that he represents the best in the BBC, which is impartiality. And there are people on the populist right of the spectrum, which is growing in size, who, in my view, interpret impartiality as expressing the views that they have as powerfully as possible. There is no concept of impartiality in some of what they say that I can recognise. And I've worked in the BBC for a very long time, and I know it is committed to that. And it does make errors in the huge number of programmes that it puts out in news, current affairs, documentaries. It makes errors. All broadcasters do.
Do you think that there might not be institutional bias then? It's clear that you don't think that exists, as Deborah Turness said today. But do you think the BBC is perhaps guilty of groupthink, maybe even subconsciously, with a left-leaning, liberal, metropolitan viewpoint that sort of seeps in, maybe unintentionally?
I don't take that view. If you listen to the BBC, which I do a lot, it is not metropolitan. It's an out-of-date assumption that it's metropolitan. It's got bases everywhere across the country. In Salford, which is hardly metropolitan London, it has people who know that territory, who know their audiences. So I don't think it is institutionally biased. And I think that was one of the reasons, I suspect, why there was such a long time, very unfortunately, before the letter finally went to the committee from Samir Shah, to the Culture Committee. So I don't think that.
Do you think that the word coup is wrong then? David Yelland, who used to edit The Sun, said on the BBC this morning he felt that there was some sort of coup from the BBC board, that the Observer newspaper as well, saying that political interference has led to these resignations. Would you go that far? People who want to see the end of the BBC have been working in some sort of Machiavellian way to cause this upset?
I'm cautious about the word coup. I mean, I've reported from places where there were coups, and I know what that means as military action using guns, seizing buildings. I think that everyone cites the name of Robbie Gibb for being a very powerful figure. But I think that I don't want to identify individuals. I think that there is a definite urge, and don't forget the non-executive members of the board, appointed from outside, some of them were appointed under previous administrations, and in the case of we know that one of the former leaders of the Conservative Party, has been denouncing the BBC all over the place. And he actually put Robbie Gibb into post. But that said, I don't doubt that Robbie Gibb believes what he says. I don't think he's just trying to, destroy the BBC. I don't think that. I do think that people like him like the idea of the BBC being weakened. That's the problem. They want to see the BBC weakened, not strengthened. They probably have strong views about how the licence fee, or whether there should be a licence fee. They probably have very strong views about how the charter should change the constitutional role of the BBC. I don't know that, but I am suspicious. But coup is not a word I'd use.
No, we should probably explain. Robbie Gibb is a non-executive director on the board of the BBC. He used to be Theresa May's director of communications. No, that's absolutely fine. So how does the BBC move on from all of this then? Putting the Donald Trump possibly suing to one side. It has to own up to its mistakes sooner, would you say? And also perhaps has to instill in the workforce the importance of impartiality.
I think that has to be hammered again and again and again, particularly as we now live in such a fractured, divided society where people's views are picked up from all sources, social media and elsewhere, and sometimes aren't thought through very carefully. It's a rather toxic environment, a polarised environment, makes impartiality even more important. As to the future for the BBC, I've always thought, actually, that the BBC, in what it says publicly, because of its wanting to do due diligence to everyone involved, don't forget it has to apologise publicly far more than any other organisation that I know of, a public organisation. It should move more swiftly towards making apologies when they're wrong, more on the front foot, and more on the front foot when they are absolutely convinced that they're being unfairly treated. The big problem is going to be what happens in the next several months. How many months before someone can be found of anything like the calibre of Tim Davie, for instance, to lead the BBC in these extremely troubled times? So yes, it is very serious for the BBC, and I just hope that a bit of balance will be restored, rather more impartiality in the judgment that is taken about how the BBC is doing, how it's performing, and what it has to do.